It all began with what seemed like a simple trash can and ended with a wrecked SUV, criminal charges, a $12,000 payout, and a painful lesson for a neighbor who chose the wrong family to mess with. Imagine this. The early morning silence shattered by the crack of plastic breaking, followed by the harsh scrape of metal against pavement. A pearl-white Escalade speeds off, leaving my garbage scattered across the driveway like confetti. But here's the thing about bullies. They never think their victims will fight back with something solid, both legally and physically. By the time everything was over, this self-proclaimed compliance officer had destroyed her own luxury vehicle, exposed herself in a $47,000 embezzlement scandal, and learned the hard way that not everyone bows to fake authority. Tell me honestly, what would you do if your neighbor treated your property like her own demolition derby? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if this kind of HOA madness is happening where you live too. But let me rewind for a second. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 45 years old, and I've worked as an electrician for over 2 decades. Recently divorced, I've been fighting for joint custody of my 2 teenagers, Lily, who's 16, and Noah, 14. We live in Pinewood Gardens. It's one of those cookie-cutter HOA neighborhoods in suburban Ohio, the kind of place where lawns must be trimmed to exactly 2.5 inches. And even your mailbox color has to be on an approved list. I bought a corner lot house here 3 years ago, right after the divorce. I thought it would be a fresh start, safe neighborhood, good schools, and space for the kids to have their own rooms. What I didn't anticipate was Karen Mitchell. She's 52, a widow with no children, retired from managing a downtown bank. Karen drives a massive pearl-white Escalade that's bigger than some studio apartments. And even though compliance officer isn't a real HOA role, she's taken it upon herself to patrol the neighborhood like it's her personal kingdom. Thanks to her close friendship with the HOA president, Richard Coleman, she basically acts untouchable. Now here's why my corner lot matters. City rules say trash bins must be placed within 3 feet of the curb every Tuesday morning, which happens to be right in line with Karen's daily 6:15 a.m. power walk. The first incident happened in September. During the second week of school, I was brewing coffee while the kids got ready when I heard the sound of plastic exploding, like a gunshot. I rushed outside and found my brand new trash can obliterated, garbage spread everywhere, like a bomb had gone off. Karen was backing her Escalade away, lowering her window with the fakest concern I've ever seen. "Oh my goodness," she said sweetly. "These streets are just so narrow. I hope you weren't too attached to that old bin." Old bin. I'd just bought it the week before at Home Depot for $23. Still, I kept calm, assumed it was an accident, and spent 20 minutes cleaning soggy cereal boxes off the driveway while Lily and Noah watched from the window. Embarrassed that their dad was crawling around in pajamas that week. It happened 3 more times. Same scene, same time, same smirk. By Friday, I was sure it wasn't an accident. And the following Tuesday, I got confirmation. My elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, told me directly. She goes that way on purpose. There's plenty of space on the other side. I tried confronting Karen during one of her afternoon walks. "Hey, about the trash can situation," but she cut me off with a sugary smile. "Daniel, you're new to community living. Oversized containers disrupt normal traffic flow. Maybe you should consider changing your placement times." Placement. Times like there's some magical hour when the garbage truck doesn't require bins at the curb. That night, I dug into property rights, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. Turns out, trash cans at the curb still count as private property. More importantly, the HOA has no rules about what time they can be placed, only that they can't remain visible except on collection day. By the end of the month, I'd already replaced 4 trash bins, spending $92 total. The kids were stressed, and even my custody evaluator noted neighborhood stability concerns. That's when Karen's behavior shifted. During her morning trash can runs, she started making direct eye contact, smirking as if daring me to stop her. Game on, too. Weeks into October, she escalated from property damage to psychological warfare. I came home one evening to find a certified letter waiting for me. The envelope was thick, the paper expensive, the ink fresh. My stomach sank before I even opened it. The accusation, improper trash receptacle, the violation letter was written. In stiff legal jargon that could have made a paralegal proud, placement creating traffic hazard, it read, Section 4.7, 3. No obstruction of vehicular traffic patterns. I had exactly 72 hours to correct the so-called violation or face daily fines of $50. It was obvious Karen had pushed this through the board quickly, hoping to blindside me while they were still distracted by the evidence I'd presented. At the last meeting, this is where my years of dealing with electrical codes paid off. When something doesn't add up, you dig deeper until you find the fault. That evening, I dove into municipal law like I was tracing a short circuit. 3 hours of cross-referencing city ordinances with county regulations later, I hit gold. The city code explicitly required trash cans to be placed within 3 feet of the curb on collection day. Even better, the HOA's authority ended at the property line, meaning they had no legal right to dictate anything on the public right-of-way. I remembered reading about a homeowner in California who'd beaten their HOA with this exact argument. So, I decided to build my defense like I was prepping for a contractor's exam. I installed a doorbell camera, positioned perfectly to capture her 6:15 a.m. routine, $47. Well spent for peace of mind. I hired a professional surveyor to confirm. My bin's placement was compliant. I even convinced Mrs. Patel, my elderly neighbor, to provide a written statement. Her hands trembled as she signed it. I don't want trouble, she whispered, but this isn't right. Meanwhile, Karen went on a crusade. She plastered the Nextdoor app with posts painting me as some reckless homeowner endangering children and creating dangerous corner obstacles. The comment section turned into a battlefield, her 3 die-hard supporters versus dozens of neighbors who thought she'd finally lost her grip on reality. Then came the real twist. My buddy Dave, who works in the city's permit office, gave me a call one Tuesday morning. You're not going to believe this, he chuckled. The city had received 4 separate complaints about my trash cannage, one claiming to be from a different witness, all clearly written in the same style. The kicker: they'd all been submitted at 2:47 a.m., within 15 minutes of each other. Dave laughed. Either your neighborhood has a group of insomniacs with identical handwriting, or someone's working overtime to take you down. By Thursday's HOA board meeting, I had a folder so thick it could choke a horse. The community center smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and stale bureaucracy. A record-breaking 12 homeowners attended, and President Richard Coleman kept nervously adjusting his tie. Karen sat at the table in a crisp navy blazer, projecting authority. But I noticed her hands tremble slightly as she reached for her water glass. She knew what was coming. When they called for old business, I stood and presented my case. The room fell silent under the hum of the fluorescent lights. I read the city ordinance aloud, word for word, then displayed my survey results proving perfect compliance. Finally, I casually mentioned that I had consulted Amanda Sterling, a property rights attorney who had handled dozens of HOA disputes. She found the selective enforcement here very interesting, I added. Watching Karen's face drain of color, Richard cleared his throat 3 times before mumbling. Well, this requires further review. We'll table the matter pending additional consideration. Translation: they had nothing, and everyone knew it. But Karen wasn't finished. As we filed out of the meeting, she cornered me under the buzzing glow of the parking lot security lights. Voice dropped into a hiss, loud enough for half the neighborhood to overhear. You think you're clever? People like you move into decent communities and think the rules don't apply. Well, I've got news for you. This is just the beginning. The racial undertones in her words hung in the humid October air like smoke after a fire. Mrs. Rodriguez from Maple Street gasped audibly. Jim Torres, our maintenance guy, stared hard at his keys. Everyone heard it, and my phone sitting innocently. In my shirt pocket recorded every poisonous syllable. That night, Lily asked me why the mean lady hated us so much. Noah wanted to know if we'd have to move again. I tucked them into bed, reassuring them everything would work out. Even as I calculated the mounting costs of this war, 3 destroyed trash bins, 14 hours of documentation, growing legal fees, but something had changed. For the first time, the community was starting to see Karen for who she really was. Other homeowners had started whispering about board overreach, asking pointed questions about why rules seemed to apply to some residents but not others. Meltdown in the parking lot had peeled back the mask. Everyone could see now that this wasn't about safety or community standards. It was about power, control, and putting people she didn't like in their place. The very next morning, I noticed a shift. Instead of barreling into my trash can like usual, Karen slowed her Escalade to a crawl, eyeing the bin like a general. Studying a battlefield? The pattern was changing, which meant she was plotting her next move. November arrived like a slap of cold air, and Karen came back swinging. While I was quietly celebrating my small victory at the board meeting, she was busy arming herself with every obscure HOA bylaw she could dig up. It was like she'd spent weeks combing through the rulebook, as if she were building a federal case. The violations came in waves. First, a notice claiming my grass was too long, apparently. It's 0.75 inches instead of the approved 2.5. Then, a citation for my mailbox color, which she said had faded from heritage blue to an unapproved shade of weathered navy. Finally, she flagged 3 tiny tears in my window screens, so small you'd need a magnifying glass to spot them. Each violation carried a $50 fine and a 10-day deadline. But here's the kicker. I spent one Saturday walking the neighborhood with a tape measuring camera and found identical violations on 14 other properties. Richard Coleman's grass was nearly 3 inches tall. Mrs. Patterson's mailbox had faded to almost the same color as mine, and half the houses on Maple Street had storm-damaged screens. Yet somehow, only I was singled out. While Karen was busy playing prosecutor, I was sipping coffee at Home Depot's contractor desk with my buddy Dale Kowalski, a concrete specialist with 23 years under his belt. I told him about the trash can saga, and his weathered face broke into a grin. "No," he said, stirring sugar with a paint stick. "There's no law that says trash bins have to be plastic. Could be metal, could be concrete. Long as it holds garbage and meets the size requirements, you're good." That conversation planted the seed for Karen's worst nightmare. 60 pounds of concrete mix, steel rebar for reinforcement, a clever modification to the shell of a standard, plastic bin. Total cost, $47. Far cheaper than the $350 I was staring down in fines and replacement cans. Still, had to cover my bases. Tuesday night, I compiled a complete set of photos documenting every violation I'd found across the neighborhood. Wednesday, I'd filed a formal complaint with the HOA about selective and discriminatory enforcement. And here's something I've learned in 20 years of dealing with permits and inspectors. Bureaucrats hate when you use their own system against them. My complaint forced the board to either crack down on everyone or admit they were targeting me. Neither option made Karen look good. Then I dug deeper into her pattern. In the past year, Karen had issued 67 violation notices. 49 of them went to single parents, minorities, or elderly residents. Only 18 had been issued to married couples or longtime homeowners. The discrimination was blatant. It practically screamed federal lawsuit. I even remembered reading about Fair Housing Act cases where this kind of selective targeting triggered civil rights investigations. The thought of Karen having to explain her enforcement patterns to a lawyer specializing in discrimination made me smile for the first time in weeks. By Friday, I was ready to put my concrete plan into action. Lily and Noah thought it was hilarious helping me mix cement in the garage while classic rock played from my old paint-splattered radio. The sharp smell of curing concrete brought back memories of helping my dad pour a basement floor 3 decades. I got that smell of permanence. The engineering was simple, but solid. The exterior looked exactly like any other black plastic trash bin on the block. Drainage holes were maintained. The size matched city requirements. But inside, hidden beneath the shell, 60 pounds of steel-reinforced concrete waited to teach Karen a physics lesson. That Monday morning, I rolled my new Fortress can to the curb in its usual spot. At 6:15 sharp, Karen's Escalade came rumbling down the street. This time, she slowed. clearly suspicious. The bin looked the same, but something felt off. She lined up and hit it at her usual 15 miles per hour. The sound was glorious. Not the brittle crunch of plastic, but a heavy thunk, followed by the screech of metal against immovable concrete. Her running board bent like tin foil. My trash can sat there completely unbothered. From my kitchen window, coffee mug warm in my hands, I watched her sit in shock for a full half-minute. Then, determined, she tried again from another angle. Same result. More damage to her SUV. Zero damage to my concrete fortress. The beauty of it all? Completely legal. No ordinance broken. No HOA rule violated. Just a homeowner who decided to upgrade his bin with stronger materials. If she wanted to keep ramming it, that was her insurance company's problem. Over the next week, Karen kept trying. Each collision left new dents and scratches on her Escalade while my reinforced can remained smugly intact. By Friday, her repairs were already pushing $800. Mine had nothing but a couple scuff marks that only made it look more authentic, and the neighborhood noticed. People started talking. For the first time, Karen wasn't controlling the story. By mid-November, she had gone from neighborhood busybody to full-blown obsessive investigator. She stalked my street like a suburban detective, circling in her battered SUV at odd hours. I wouldn't be surprised if she was dreaming about my trash can and flowcharts and conspiracy diagrams. The first real clue about her little investigation surfaced on a quiet Tuesday morning when Mrs. Patel called me. Her voice was hushed, almost conspiratorial. "Daniel, that woman was outside your driveway last night with a flashlight in some kind of scale. I saw the whole thing from my window. She was trying to weigh your trash can. Couldn't help but laugh at the image." Karen Mitchell, most likely in her usual navy blazer and practical shoes, sneaking around my property at midnight with a bathroom scale, acting like she was cracking some grand mystery. The woman clearly needed a hobby that didn't involve trespassing, but her obsession didn't stop there, it actually escalated. By midweek, Jim Torres, our maintenance guy, told me that she had cornered him at the hardware store. She grilled him about concrete purchases and tried to figure out which residents had recently bought suspicious materials. Not only that, she even started snooping around my social media accounts, searching for hints of construction in my weekend project posts. The most ridiculous stunt came on Thursday. A wary-looking city inspector named Pete knocked on my door, clipboard in hand. "Got a complaint," he said, with zero enthusiasm. Someone reported possible building code violations. Something about unauthorized concrete structures on residential property. Pete walked over to my trash can, looked at it for all of 30 seconds, and shook his head. "It's just a garbage bin, not a foundation. No permits required, no violations here." He left looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Of course, Karen wasn't done with her official harassment campaign. The following week, I got a formal notice from the HOA demanding immediate property access for compliance verification. The letter had her fingerprints all over it and was conveniently rubber-stamped by Richard Coleman, the HOA president. Thankfully, I had already done my homework on property rights. I knew HOS couldn't just go on fishing expeditions without legal cause. My polite but firm response made it clear. No one was setting foot on my private property without a court order or genuine emergency. If they wanted to look at my trash, they could do so from the sidewalk like any other passerby. The thought of Karen's growing frustration was almost as satisfying as the smell of fresh concrete. Meanwhile, her beloved SUV was turning into a rolling testament to the durability of reinforced steel and concrete. Every morning she rammed into my trash can, and every morning it was her Escalade that came out worse. The running board now dangled at an awkward angle. The bumper had spiderweb cracks, and one headlight rattled ominously. The neighborhood began noticing. On my Saturday coffee run, I overheard 3 separate conversations about that crazy woman, who keeps crashing into the same trash can. Mrs. Rodriguez had even started timing her collisions, while teenagers down the street had set up a betting pool over the daily results. At home, my kids were just as entertained. Lily thought the whole thing was both hilarious and mortifying. "Dad, kids at school are asking if we're the family with the concrete trash can lady," she sighed at dinner. "I don't know whether to laugh or crawl under the table." Ever the practical one had a different angle. "Seriously, Dad, we could charge admission. $5 a head and I'd have college tuition covered just from neighbors wanting front row seats to the morning demolition derby. The real breakthrough came during a casual neighborhood gathering when Patricia Lopez, one of the only sensible board members, pulled me aside. She spoke in a low voice near the community center's coffee station. "Daniel, you need to know, Karen has been meeting privately with Richard Coleman. She's pushing for expanded enforcement powers, property inspections, restrictions on building materials, even background checks for contractors. But there's more. Every time we discuss the HOA budget, she's ready with detailed proposals favoring this one particular company I've never heard of. Hey, she's been planning this for months." That conversation lit a fire in me. Maybe Karen's obsession wasn't just about control. It might be about money. So I started digging. Public records can reveal a lot if you know where to look. By Sunday night, I had uncovered something far bigger than her petty war against. My trash can god Karen Mitchell wasn't just a power-hungry busybody. She was running a scam, and my reinforced garbage bin had accidentally put her little empire at risk. That night, instead of helping Lily with history homework or Noah with algebra, I was deep in the city's contract database. A simple search for business registrations with the name Mitchell made me nearly spill my coffee. There it was. Mitchell Construction LLC, formed just 6 months ago. Listed ownership, 40% Karen Mitchell. President her husband, Richard. The timeline made everything click. Company created in May, first HOA maintenance, bid submitted in July, her harassment campaign against me beginning in September. It all fit perfectly. I kept digging, and what I found looked like a forensic accountant's dream. In just 4 months, Mitchell Construction had been awarded 7 different maintenance contracts by the HOA landscaping. Sidewalk fixes, playground, upkeep worth over $23,000 in total. And the kicker: on every single bid, they undercut competitors by the same suspicious margin of $50 to $100. Just enough to win. But not enough to raise alarms. It felt like watching a card shark at a casino every move. Technically within the rules. But the whole game obviously stacked in her favor. What really set off alarms in my mind, though, was one glaring detail. Karen Mitchell had personally voted in favor of every single one of those contracts. 7 contracts, 7 approvals, and 7 direct payouts, funneling into her own families. Business, the conflict of interest was so obvious, it could have been flashing in neon lights. From my earlier legal research, I remembered something crucial: board members have a fiduciary duty. They're required by law to disclose any personal financial stake in vendor agreements. Hiding that information isn't just shady, it violates state nonprofit statutes and opens the door to civil lawsuits and even criminal fraud charges. And the evidence was all right there in black and white. Business filings, HOA minutes, contract award slips, monthly bank records. Karen had been quietly rerouting community dues into her own household. But the timeline made it even worse. The first polite conversation I'd had with her about my trash can, September 15th. The first time, publicly questioned maintenance costs, also September. And wouldn't you know it, just 12 days earlier. On September 3rd, she'd kicked off her campaign of harassment against me. My heavy concrete trash bin wasn't just blocking her morning stroll. It had been blocking exposure of her theft. She wasn't mad about property rights. She was trying to bury evidence. The scope of it all nearly made my head spin. Civil liability for financial abuse. Criminal fraud exposure, guaranteed removal from the board if proven guilty. This wasn't just HOA politics anymore. This was corruption, embezzlement, and a woman desperate enough to wage psychological warfare against anyone who got too close. I didn't waste time. I printed everything, stored digital copies across 3 separate cloud accounts, and immediately sent the full file to attorney Amanda Sterling with a note, urgent review. Criminal implications possible. The game had just flipped, Karen thought. She was battling some ordinary homeowner over a trash can. In reality, she was standing on the edge of a scandal that could bankrupt her family and put her behind bars. That Tuesday morning, I stood at my kitchen window watching her SUV slam into my concrete fortress yet again. Her luxury Escalade was now carrying over $1,200 in body damage. My trash can, still standing tall, unmoved, like a monument to her own stupidity. But for the first time, my mind wasn't on trash cans or bylaws. It was on justice, accountability, and the satisfaction of watching a bully realize their victim could fight back harder than expected. By that evening, my garage had become a full-blown war room. The workbenches were cleared, folding tables lined the walls. Mismatched chairs surrounded a giant evidence board strung together like a crime drama set. At 7 p.m. sharp, my allies arrived. Mrs. Patel came first, carrying her ever-present thermos of jasmine tea, nerves barely hidden behind her determined expression. Then came Jim Torres, still in his maintenance uniform, tools rattling at his side. Patricia Lopez walked in with a thick pile of financial files borrowed from the HOA records. Last was Dale Kowalski, grinning like a kid, holding a box of donuts as if this were a party instead of an expose on neighborhood corruption. "All right," I said, pinning the final piece of the timeline to the wall. "Here's the situation." The evidence board was overwhelming. $23,000 in suspicious contracts, 7 separate conflicts of interest, 47 harassment incidents logged, 1 very battered Escalade as visual proof of Karen's unraveling. Tricia shook her head at the numbers. "I knew something was off," she muttered. "But this is systemic." Dale studied the SUV photos. "The bumper alone's a $2,000 fix. She's learning an expensive lesson thanks to your concrete bin." Over the next hour, we built a layered battle plan. Jim would keep eyes on Karen and record any retaliation. Mrs. Patel would rally neighbors door to door. Patricia would push for a board audit from the inside. Dale would help validate the physical evidence. Meanwhile, Amanda Sterling confirmed. We had legal grounds for harassment, financial fraud, and misconduct, but timing mattered. Act too soon, and Karen might shred the evidence. Wait too long, and she'd finish covering her tracks. My years as an electrician had taught me this. Complex problems need full system solutions. Fixing one fuse doesn't stop a short circuit. You'd have to rewire the whole system. That's exactly how we'd fight this. It for pressure points at once. Legal pressure via lawsuits and criminal complaints. Social pressure through community petitions. Political pressure by dragging city officials and media into it. Financial pressure with audits and contract cancellations. Wednesday morning, the campaign began. With well-organized documents and polished presentations, I knocked on doors across Pinewood Gardens. The response floored me. 89 signed in favor of property rights. 34 demanded financial audits, and 12 even volunteered to testify at the board meeting. Some neighbors resisted at first, like Mrs. Rodriguez on Maple Street, who nearly slammed the door in my face. But after a 5-minute rundown, she was signing furiously and muttering angry Spanish phrases about Karen. "She'll fine me for leaving my can out 15 minutes early," she growled. 15 minutes! Like the garbage police were timing us with stopwatches. By the end of the day, the opposition map revealed an unmistakable pattern. I knew the tide was turning. Karen's most loyal backers were almost entirely long-time homeowners who had benefited for years from selective rule enforcement. The undecided crowd consisted mostly of newer residents, nervous about property values dropping or afraid of retaliation from the board. Everyone else, however, was eager to finally see her held accountable. Preparing the media strategy took 3 solid days of planning. Channel 7's investigative team had a strong track record for exposing municipal corruption, and reporter Sarah Rett Kim had previously covered multiple HOA scandals across the metro area. Our press kit was airtight. Professional timeline graphics, expert legal commentary, and over 12 minutes of edited footage capturing Karen's increasingly reckless collisions. The social media push grew far faster than I ever imagined. Our Pinewood Gardens Transparency Facebook group jumped to 67 members in just 4 days. As neighbors came forward with their own accounts of selective enforcement, harassment, and questionable financial practices, time-lapse of Karen's morning routine set to circus music. which quickly went viral across suburban community pages. Meanwhile, my concrete trash can had become both evidence and entertainment. Thursday morning brought Karen's 53rd collision attempt, leaving her SUV's headlight dangling like a broken tooth. By now, neighborhood kids were showing up early at bus stops just to watch the daily demolition derby unfold, Lily told me. Her classmates had started calling our home the house with the indestructible trash can. Noah, ever the entrepreneur, began charging kids 50 cents each to watch the growing compilation on his phone. The story spread faster than gossip at a Sunday potluck. By Sunday evening, every piece was in place. The board meeting was set for Tuesday night, media interviews arranged for Wednesday morning, criminal complaints prepped for Thursday. 118 residents had committed to showing up, 17 prepared to speak during the public comment session. The coalition was strong. Evidence heir to hand, Karen had no idea what was coming. But the weekend before our carefully planned showdown, Karen completely unraveled. Desperation has a scent like burnt coffee mixed with panic sweat, and it radiated off her. She must have sensed the walls closing in, because her harassment campaign escalated from annoying to criminal in record time. Late Saturday night, the hiss of spray paint jolted me awake. From my bedroom window, I spotted a figure crouched by the trash can, caught in the glare of my motion sensor lights. By the time I grabbed my phone and ran outside, they were gone, leaving behind sloppy orange graffiti spelling "move" across the concrete. The thing about spray paint on concrete, though, is it washes off in 30 seconds. The thing about security cameras, they record in HD, including license plates like the pearl white Escalade parked 3 houses down during the incident. On Monday, the harassment escalated further. An anonymous complaint to the gas company alleged I was conducting unsafe excavation that could damage underground lines. The inspector who arrived was apologetic but thorough, spending 2 hours scanning the property before confirming what I already knew. No digging, no violations, no issues. Shaking his head, he muttered, "Whoever filed this either can't see straight or isn't right in the head." Then came the twist that revealed just how desperate Karen had become. On Tuesday morning at the hardware store, my neighbor Jim Torres pulled me aside, his weathered face lined with concern. "Daniel," he said, "she hired a private security company to keep tabs on your house. Riverside Security. $1 a day over a trash can dispute." The woman's lost her mind. Ironically, her surveillance only added to mine. My upgraded system captured her drive-by stakeouts, her late-night photo sessions, and her increasingly erratic behavior. She was unraveling fast, and every second was being recorded. What truly infuriated me, though, came on Wednesday. Lily returned from school upset after overhearing Karen telling another parent about bad influences in the neighborhood and inappropriate role models for children. The undertones weren't subtle, and the implications for my custody case were crystal clear. That night, I hired Beth Morrison, a retired police detective specializing in harassment cases. For $200 a day, she documented Karen's stalking professionally and could testify about escalation patterns and threat levels if needed. Karen's sabotage attempts only grew nastier. Someone poured what appeared to be battery acid on my concrete trash can, leaving only a faint stain. Anonymous complaints flooded city offices about everything from my grass height to my electrical permits. Fake 1-star reviews appeared on my business page faster than I could flag them. But the discovery that shocked me most came Friday evening. Noah was fixing his bike in the driveway when he spotted something strange under my work truck. A small, black device with blinking lights, magnetically attached. "Dad," he called, his voice tight. "What's this thing under your truck?" It was a GPS tracker, professional grade, easily worth $300, and absolutely illegal. When placed without consent, I photographed it from every angle, carefully removed it, and drove straight to the police station. Officer Derek Martinez took the report with the weary expression of someone who'd seen this before. "Mr. Carter," he told me, "this isn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It's a stalking, harassment, and unauthorized surveillance. We're building a criminal case." At the same time, an insurance fraud angle surfaced. Karen had filed a $3,200 claim for road hazard damage, insisting her SUV was damaged on a city street. Unfortunately for her, my security footage showed weeks of deliberate collisions with my trash can. When the State Farm investigator arrived, I handed him a complete evidence package, 53 documented collision attempts, video compilations, witness statements, and expert assessments. His conclusion was immediate. Ma'am, this isn't road hazard damage. This is intentional property destruction with your own vehicle. Claim denied. Fraud unit notified. By then, community pressure was boiling over. Our Facebook group had ballooned to 94 members, sharing new horror stories about Karen. Mrs. Patel reported harassment over her rose bushes. The Johnsons on Oak Street had received violation notices for their children's chalk drawings. Even Richard Coleman, the HOA president, was privately distancing himself from her. Saturday morning brought her 57th failed collision attempt. This time, her bumper tore completely free, forcing her to crawl around my driveway in business attire, scooping up plastic shards while neighbors peered from their windows. It might have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. By Sunday evening, everything was ready. Criminal behavior documented, witness statements notarized, financial fraud exposed, and a community coalition standing united. Karen Mitchell was about to face the reckoning she had never imagined. Tuesday's board meeting would be less of a confrontation and more of a public execution. Karen just didn't know it yet. Monday morning, 12 hours before our planned board meeting showdown, Karen made her most desperate move yet. Richard Coleman called an emergency closed-door session to address what he termed escalating liability concerns and community safety issues. The man's voice on my voicemail sounded like he'd been gargling gravel and anxiety for breakfast. The emergency meeting was classic. Damage control, 3 board members huddled in the community center office while Prescott and Associates attorney Harold Masterson billed $400 an hour to figure out how deep in legal quicksand they'd stepped. Through the blinds, I could see animated gestures and what looked like Karen waving documents like surrender flags. Patricia Lopez texted me updates from inside the meeting. Karen's claiming you've made terrorist threats. Wants emergency powers to seize dangerous modifications. Harold looks like he'd rather be defending serial killers. The cover-up attempt was as clumsy as Karen's morning collision techniques. Someone had backdated conflict of interest. Disclosure forms for Mitchell Construction, but the digital timestamps on the email server told a different story. You can't retroactively create ethics compliance, especially when the original contract votes are recorded in public meeting minutes. Meanwhile, the insurance investigation was picking up steam faster. Then Karen's Escalade hitting my concrete fortress. State investigator Maria Santos had subpoenaed HOA financial records, board meeting minutes, and all communication between Karen and the association's insurance carrier. The paper trail was about as subtle as a train wreck in slow motion. Tuesday, noon brought the most shocking revelation yet. Richard Mitchell, Karen's husband, called me directly, something that took more courage than I'd expected from a man who'd been watching his wife destroy their life savings one collision at a time. "Daniel, this has to stop." His voice was barely above a whisper. "She spent $8,000 on lawyers, surveillance, and vehicle repairs. Our insurance got canceled. The business is facing contract cancellations. I need to know. What would it take to make this go away?" I almost felt sorry for the guy. Almost. "Richard, your wife stalked my family, vandalized my property, committed insurance fraud, and embezzled from 127 homeowners. This isn't going away with an apology and a check." The twist that revealed just how desperate they'd become came to ours before the board meeting. Karen filed an emergency restraining order petition based on completely fabricated evidence. Fake threatening voicemails, doctored photos of aggressive confrontations, and witness statements from people who didn't exist. The petition was so poorly constructed that Judge Patricia Williams dismissed it without even scheduling a hearing. "Miss Mitchell, these recordings are clearly edited. These photos are obviously staged, and these witnesses appear to be fictional. Filing false evidence is contempt of court. Consider this your only warning." Karen's legal troubles were multiplying. Faster than her collision attempts, The state insurance commissioner had assigned investigator Maria Santos to build a criminal fraud case. The district attorney's office was reviewing harassment and stalking charges. The IRS had received copies of all financial documentation showing unreported income from the construction contracts. As 6 p.m. approached, the community center parking lot filled up like Black Friday at Best Buy. Cars lined both sides of Maple Street with neighbors walking from 3 blocks away carrying lawn chairs and folding signs. Channel 7's news van pulled up precisely at 5:30, followed by Channel 12 and the Metro Weekly reporter who'd been following our story. Inside the meeting room, could cut the tension with a concrete saw. 118 residents packed into a space designed 440, with overflow crowds standing along the walls and spilling into the hallway. The smell of nervous perspiration mixed with industrial coffee created an atmosphere thick enough to chew. Karen arrived fashionably late, flanked by Harold Masterson and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Her usual navy blazer had been replaced with funeral black, and the tremor in her hands was visible from across the room. Richard Coleman kept adjusting his tie like a noose was tightening around his neck. The attempted intimidation backfired spectacularly. Masterson's opening statement about frivolous complaints and disruptive residents was interrupted by Mrs. Patel standing up with her stack of witness statements. "Excuse me," she said in her careful English, "but which one of us has been committing insurance fraud and embezzling money?" The room erupted in applause and nervous laughter. 17 neighbors had prepared to speak during public comment, each armed with documentation of Karen's harassment, financial irregularities, or selective enforcement patterns. The evidence compilation filled 3 bankers' boxes and included everything from collision videos to contract analysis to criminal complaint receipts. But the real bombshell was yet to come. At exactly 6:45, as Karen was attempting to deflect questions about the Mitchell construction contracts, Officer Derek Martinez walked through the community center doors, carrying an official-looking folder. "Sorry to interrupt," he announced to the suddenly silent room, "but I have a warrant to serve regarding insurance fraud and stalking charges." The color drained from Karen's face faster than antifreeze from her damaged Escalade. Harold Masterson immediately began whispering urgent legal advice while Richard Coleman looked like he was having chest pains. "Game over. Check in, mate. Time for the public execution." The community center had never seen anything like it. 127 residents. Literally every homeowner in Pinewood Gardens packed into a room designed for maybe 40 people with another 15 media representatives. Setting up cameras like this was a presidential debate. The air conditioning couldn't keep up with the body heat, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, sensing blood in the water. I'd positioned myself strategically in the 3rd row, flanked by Mrs. Patel and Jim Torres, with my concrete trash can wheeled in as Exhibit A and sitting proudly beside the podium. The symbolism wasn't subtle. The 60 pounds monument to her stupidity had become the star witness in what was about to unfold. Karen Mitchell sat at the board table, looking like she'd rather be getting a root canal without anesthesia. Her usual navy blazer had been replaced with funeral black. Every few seconds she'd glance toward the exit like a trapped animal calculating escape routes. Harold Masterson whispered urgent legal advice in her ear while Richard Coleman sweated through his shirt like a man facing his own execution. Officer Martinez's entrance with that warrant folder had changed everything. The room fell silent except for the mechanical whir of news cameras and the nervous tapping of Karen's pen against the table. A rapid-fire staccato that sounded like Morse code for "help me." Richard called for order with a voice that cracked like a teenager's. "We'll now hear public comments regarding recent community concerns." I stood up first, carrying my presentation. Boards like a prosecutor approaching the jury. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the exit sign transformer. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying easily through the packed space. "This isn't about trash cans. This isn't about HOA bylaws or property rights or community standards. This is about accountability, transparency, and stopping corruption before it destroys our neighborhood." I walked them through the timeline. Methodically, 57 documented collision attempts, each one recorded in high definition. The GPS tracker illegally placed on my vehicle, the spray paint vandalism captured on security cameras, the fake insurance claims that constituted felony fraud, but the real showstopper was the financial presentation. Using a borrowed projector, I displayed the contract analysis that showed $23,400 funneled from community dues directly into Karen's family business account. Every month you've been paying higher fees to fund Mrs. Mitchell's personal construction company, I announced, watching jaws drop throughout the audience. 7 contracts, 7 undisclosed conflicts of interest, 7 violations of state nonprofit law. The video compilation played next to 12 minutes of Karen's greatest hits set to a soundtrack of crunching plastic and scraping metal. The gasps and nervous laughter from the crowd provided perfect accompaniment to the footage of her increasingly desperate collision attempts. Then came the mic drop moment I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Double quotes Mrs. Mitchell, I said, turning to face her directly while the cameras rolled. You've spent $3,400 on lawyers. You've destroyed your $60,000 vehicle, committed insurance fraud, and stalked my family over a $23 trash can. But the real crime is the $47,000. You've stolen from this community through your family's construction company? The room erupted. Neighbors who'd been grumbling about rising HOA fees suddenly understood where their money had been going. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up shouting in rapid Spanish that probably wasn't complimentary. The teenagers from Elm Street actually started clapping like they were at a concert. Karen's response was everything I'd hoped for and more. She shot up from her chair like a jack-in-a-box, her carefully constructed composure finally cracking. Under the pressure, "This is harassment," she screamed, her voice reaching frequencies that probably bothered dogs 3 blocks away. "These people don't understand property values or community standards. They come into decent neighborhoods and think rules don't apply to them." The racial undertones hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Channel 7's camera captured every word, every gesture, every moment of her complete psychological breakdown. Mrs. Patel actually gasped audibly when Karen pointed directly at her and shouted something about certain elements ruining the community.
Harold.
Masterson tried desperately to control his client, but Karen was beyond legal advice. She grabbed my evidence boards, attempting to tear them apart before Jim Torres and 2 other neighbors gently restrained her. The woman was having a complete meltdown on live television, while Officer Martinez calmly took notes for his incident report. "I built this community," she shrieked, mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. "I protected property values. I kept standards high. And this is how you treat someone who sacrificed everything for neighborhood integrity." Richard Coleman called for recess, but nobody was leaving. It was better than reality TV, more dramatic than a soap opera, and more satisfying than watching your worst enemy step on a rake. Patricia Lopez stood up amid the chaos and made the motion that everyone was waiting for. I move for the immediate suspension of Karen Mitchell from the board, pending criminal investigation and financial audit. The vote was unanimous 4-0, with Karen abstaining while handcuffed to Officer Martinez's chair. Justice served concrete cold with a side of public humiliation.